Dave Ross in the house. Let's talk a little UFC.
Yes, sir.
This not necessarily a positive story coming out of the UFC. Heavyweight Mark Hunt has filed a suit against the UFC president, Dana White, and Brock Lesnar. In the lawsuit, Hunt accuses these people of racketeering. He is seeking financial relief, citing both physical damages and damages to his brand. The lawsuit, of course, stems from the UFC 200 fight between Hunt and Lesnar, who failed multiple drug tests and was fined 10% of his $2.5 million purse and was suspended for 1 year. Dave, what's your reaction to this lawsuit?
What'd you say there? How much did they suspend? 10% of his $2.5 million purse. That's the big sticking point for Mark Hunt. And I went out to read it because I thought, wow, this is interesting. A guy who is still fighting in the UFC is suing the Fertitta brothers, the old owners, who are no longer in power there, Dana White and Brock Lesnar. And Brock Lesnar, again, ostracized from the UFC right now. Dana, still very visible, as we know, as the president. He's basically saying that this sends a bad precedent to kids, to UFC fighters, that you can go ahead and fight, pumped up on roids. I called this out, Mark Hunt, before I fought Brock Lesnar and said, he's not clean. He said that before they ever stepped foot in the octagon. And then he was proven to be correct after the fact. And what did the UFC do? As you mentioned, 10% of the purse. As what he wanted was all of the purse.
Right.
You take away that. You strip away the money that he made to fight that night and prove to everybody, kids, fellow fighters, that this is not the right way to go about doing business in the UFC. And that's what he says in the lawsuit. He basically says you cannot keep doing business like this, i.e., if you test positive after the fight, bye-bye purse money, that goes away. Mark Hunt wants that money.
Yeah.
I think he wants the money that he got beat up for 15 minutes of brutality at the hands of Brock Lesnar, a guy that he said was juiced, again, proven correct afterward. I want your money. You don't deserve any of it. So, UFC, if you're not going to do the right thing,
we're going to go to court.
We're going to go to court over this, and we're going to figure out what the courts decide who should get that money. Brock, you want to give up that money? I bet you this lawsuit goes away. Dana White, you want to come up with some money? Fertitta brothers, you guys want to come up with something? I bet you this goes away. But until then, Mark Hunt's making a point. I'm not going to fight. This isn't over records like you do in baseball. This is over my brain. This is over my body, where I got beat up, he might say illegally, for 15 minutes for a guy that I told you before we go into the octagon, he better be clean, because I'm looking at him. He's not passing the eye test. He's not passing tests that I have to pass. And then, of course, he was proven correct on all of those counts. It's going to be very interesting to see what happens here, because this is new precedent.
Do you agree with what Mark Hunt is doing? Because he does have a fight scheduled with Alistair Overeem, UFC 209 in March. So you're going to fight in March, but you're taking the UFC to court.
I'm taking my employer to court, but yet still going to go to work for that March date. This is uncharted territory. We have not seen this before in the UFC. I think he's got a valid case. I think he's had a point. He's been making it before the fight with Brock Lesnar back at UFC 200, and he's been making it loudly afterward. I think he feels ignored, that the UFC did not do anything about his claims afterward, and he was so fed up, what else am I to do? Let me take him to court and see if I get their attention. The interesting thing going forward is, Dana White, you going to stand up there on a podium and promote his fight when he's taking you by name to court as the president of the UFC? Brock Lesnar's like, I get called, I guess I'll show up. Fertitta brothers are like, hey, man, I'm out of this thing now, but it was under their jurisdiction, if you will. So let's find out what the courts say. I think he's got a case, but I do think this smells and reeks of, if you give me some money, this might go away.
One more thing to add. This is the third straight time that Mark Hunt has fought somebody that popped positive. Antonio Silva first, Frank Mir second, and now Brock Lesnar. So that certainly adds to his frustration.